tell you about Texas radio and the big beat. It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio.
Today we have a special treat on I Remember Radio. We have 3 disc jockeys that worked together at Kfxm. They were all 3 on the cover of the same Tiger mags, and they worked consecutive shifts. Chris Roberts, Bruce Chandler, and Jhani Kaye. We're going to introduce them one at a time, and then we'll get them all together and see if they still get along. So we'll start with Chris.
Hey, it's good to be here, Mike. Thanks for inviting me. I can't believe it's been almost half a century since we were at Kfxm, but boy, those were great years.
What did you do before you got to Kfxm?
I thought I had died and gone to heaven, Mike, because I was working at KWOW, good station, the Wickstroms, but I was doing the all-night show playing country music, and I was 21 years old at the time, and I wanted to play rock and roll. I wanted to play top 40. And when I had the opportunity to be hired by Al Anthony at Kfxm, they put me right in the midday slot and made me the music director. And that's why I thought at 21 years old, oh my gosh, I have died and gone to heaven. And for the next 3 years, it felt like that because we had the top ratings against our crosstown rival, doubled them every time. And it was just a sweet 3 years that I rank with anything that I did in broadcasting, which I was on the air for 46 years, the last 23 at UCLA. But those 3 years at KFXM in San Bernardino, absolutely special.
Next, we'll go to Bruce Chandler. Bruce, what brought you into KFXM?
I was across the street at Cayman, and I remember one evening, I was thinking a rating just came out, another one, and KFXM beat us again. And I thought, you know, there's no future here at Cayman. I need to leave. True story. And the afternoon guy that was hired at KFXM, I found out later his car broke down. So that's why he never showed up. But as fate would have it, that allowed the opening to still need to be filled. And I remember one morning, I called KFXM and said I was interested in their opening. And I think I talked to Doug Collins. He was the morning man and program director. So he invited me down. So since we were enemies, Cayman and KFXM, I put sunglasses on so no one would recognize me when I went over to KFXM. And I interviewed with Doug, and then Al Anthony, the general manager, came in and he said, yeah, well, do a few of these things tonight. I was on 6 to 9 p.m. and came in. Do a few of these things tonight. It's kind of like an on-air audition, and we'll listen to you and we'll get back to you. So I made a mental note of what he wanted me to do. And the next day I got a call from Doug Collins and I was hired. So little did I know that the next day I was scheduled to be fired at Cayman. So talk about great timing. And so I started on a Monday. I left Cayman on a Friday, and I remember KFXM started promoting me that weekend, and as I was still employed at Cayman. So it was kind of what we say in the business, a real smooth segue over to KFXM across the street.
Great story. Jhani, was your segue just as smooth as Bruce's?
I started my career at KHSJ and Hemet, and I wanted to go to KFXM in the worst way. I listened to both KFXM and Cayman, but KFXM had a special appeal to me, what being Tiger radio and whatnot. And I couldn't get in. I think I sent them some tapes, if my memory serves me correctly. So I ended up going to Kathy in Bakersfield, which at one time had been a Tullis and Hearn station as well. And after one weekend, I pulled that air check and put together actually a custom tape for Kfxm. Made an appointment, walked in, met with Doug Collins. Doug played it on his reel-to-reel tape recorder in his office. Then he took it into Al Anthony, who had to give final approval. And I was on the air. And it was, like Chris Roberts said, just one of the greatest times ever. It was making it to your all-time radio station in those days. Because neither Chris nor I, and probably nor Bruce, thought we would ever get to Los Angeles at that age. So being in the Inland Empire on the number one station was a big deal.
Well, I think it's time to get y'all back together on air again for the first time in, probably 47 years. So Chris, Bruce, Jhani, I'm turning it over to you.
Uh-oh.
Well, we were all, Mike, we were all guys that were 21, 22, 23. We were young guys that I think felt really fortunate to be on a station that had such a great signal. That 590 dial position with 1,000 watts was equal to a 50,000 watt station up at 1290 where our competition was. And I don't know what it was. We had something special in the building. I know that the first rating book that ever came out, I didn't even know what ratings were. I mean, I knew that ratings were on television and I'd heard a little bit about it on radio, but the first ratings came out that I was working middays and I had a 28% share. And Al Anthony just about came in and gave me a hug, and not a raise, but a hug, and hey, way to go, high five. And hey, kid, keep it up, buddy. Blah, blah, blah. Al's the greatest programmer that I've ever worked with. And Johnny Kaye learned so much from him and became a super program director. But that 28 share, I never reached it ever again, but I know that from that particular point, if our competition had a 7, I had at least a 14, or a 10, I had a 20. And we never lost. We were just a dyno that just kept going and going, and we were just real successful. It was a lot of fun. And
hey, Chris, you want to get that phone? There's an important call on that. The other.
Oh yeah, well, we're going to ignore that, and I apologize. Yeah,
it's Al Anthony.
Yeah, it could be. He used to call up and go, "What in the hell is going on down there? What are you playing that song for? Or where'd that one come from?" And he was a great GM / he was really the program director. And no offense to Doug or anything, Doug was more of a paper pusher and wrote notes and kept the schedule. And he might have threatened to fire us at different times, which he did me several. But it was Big Al that was calling the shots, and it was just really special. There are things that I learned in the early days at Kfxm from Al Anthony that I still incorporated later on working with or for Jhani at Coast 103 and KFI. And when I did the UCLA games, things that I learned from Al that still were working 46 years later. And that's what kind of a genius he was to work for, the personality on getting yourself across to your listeners and being successful. So it was fun.
Chris, I'm going to play the part of an interviewer real quick here. What did it feel like to be music director, number one midday guy, and on the biggest station in the Inland Empire at the time when rock and roll in the 1970s, we were there in the early 70s, what was such a big part of people's lives. How did that feel? It was exciting to go on the air every day, wasn't it?
It was unbelievable. Going on the air was a blast. even behind the scenes was a ton of fun. When I became the music director, I didn't realize, at first I didn't want to be the music director, but the guy that I replaced was in charge of music. But I got my own office. Remember that? I had the records hanging in my own office. I didn't realize the position that we were in as a number one market, 25th, I guess, in the nation. We were a breakout market, and record promoters used to treat us like $1 million. I can still remember the first time they said to me, "Do you want to go see Stephen Eady?" I said, "Stephen Eady? Where at?" "Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. We'll pick you up at Ontario Airport and fly you to LAX." At that time, they didn't have the commuter jets straight to Vegas. So I got on a little prop with my girlfriend, and we flew over the valley out of Ontario to LAX, jumped on a jet, and went to Vegas, Caesar's Palace. And when I knew I was going to go to Vegas, I called up RCA Records. I said, "Hey, is there a chance for me to see Elvis?" He was at the International Hotel at that time. "No problem, Chris, we'll take care of you." And so in Vegas, saw Stephen Eady. And the sidebar comment to you, Bruce, on this, and I think both you and Jhani have heard me tell the story. When we got to the Elvis concert at the International Hotel, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to stand in this line. So we cut in line. And as we're moving up the line, I thought, well, I'll just give them my name at the front door. Let's see what happens. And they said, "Geez, we don't have your name, Mr. Roberts, on the list, but let me see if you're a special guest of Colonel Parker." And I just thought, oh yeah, right. And besides, who the hell is Colonel Parker? And I'm still learning. I'll be damned. We were special guests of Elvis and Colonel Parker. They put us right up on front of the stage where the girls would run up and jump and throw their panties at Elvis. You could look up their dresses. And it was like, are you kidding me? We're special guests of Elvis and Colonel Parker. But that was the kind of a job it was, Bruce. And I learned right away that being music director was pretty special. And I used to get a little heat from both Jhani and you, and especially the rest of the staff. When these record promoters wanted to come out and wine and dine me, I say, you know what? Why don't we take a trip out to Palm Springs and have dinner out there? And we did that a lot. So like I told Mike from the beginning, from playing all night music on a country station in Pomona and getting the job at Kfxm, I felt like I had died and gone to heaven. And for 3 years, it was heavenly.
Well, you know what wasn't heaven was having to walk out to the towers and take meter readings.
Yeah, you never just copied those down, did you?
Well, you
no,
would.
That never happened. No, we took real readings.
Yeah. Well, every half hour, you're supposed to, well, back then, you're supposed to take the readings in the studio. But I think once a week, I had to walk out to the transmitter in the middle of the field and take meter readings at the base of the towers for some reason. We all did. Yeah, I don't know what that was.
Black Widows.
Hey, back in the days too, Bruce and Jhani, where if you didn't have a first-class radio telephone license,
right,
you didn't go to work at KFXM. That they hired only people with first-class radio telephone licenses, and we did those readings because we were taking the place of an engineer.
Jhani, where did you get your first-class license?
At William B. Ogden Radio Operational Engineering School in Huntington Beach. It was
remember, coffees get them high. Remember
that?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that was Bill.
Hot
you know, Bruce, when Chris was talking about, record promotion people taking them out and whatnot, because of the salaries we earned at KFXM, we couldn't afford to go to Smugglers. I had to ride piggyback in the car with the promotion people when they took Chris out so we could eat at Smugglers Inn once in a while.
Smugglers Inn. Now there's from the past.
Yeah.
So I remember one afternoon, Chris and I were in the studio, and Jhani, you came in, and I think you were the music director at the time, but you were really put out by something that somebody didn't live up to what they were supposed to do, their job. And you were really angry, like, what's going on here? And so you were miffed. You came in the studio and just Chris and I were there. And then you left, and Chris turned to me and said, "That little beep is going to be a great program director someday."
And he was. It is.
You remember that, Chris?
Like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And then
I don't remember the occasion. I know I wasn't the music director because Chris was music director until until I left. Right. I inherited that position.
Okay, but yeah, so something really got you angry, and then because you wanted a professional outcome of whatever was supposed to happen.
But Chris is the one who actually got my mind thinking like a program director, because he taught. There were two occasions in particular. When I first got the KFXM, he was the first one to welcome me on the air and told me I didn't have to play the flashback jingle every time I played an oldie, because I was playing like 12 an hour. Anyhow, one time he said, "Look, all they do at KHJ, which is where we all wanted to be in Los Angeles, was the 5 basics: call letters, name, your name, time, and, the title of the song, and who sings the song. And if you just keep mixing those 5 facts up, you sound like you're talking and you know something and you have content, when really you're just leaning on crutches." And another time was, I asked Chris why they did the weather a certain way at KHJ. And he had figured it out and told me. And I started listening to radio in a totally different way, asking myself when I heard things on the radio, why are they doing this? Is there a science behind it, or some good reasoning, or is it just happen chance? And I think that's what really set my feet on the path of becoming a program director. Thanks, Chris.
I didn't even know that I did that.
And by the way, Bruce and Chris, maybe you remember the story of this on the glass between the newsroom and
Well, I remember when I think Chris put his hand in a shoe, and so some guy lost his toe, and they sewed a thumb on where his big toe was. He lost his big toe. So then Chris got the bright idea of putting his hand in a shoe and putting it up to the window where you could look into the studio from the newsroom, and you just lost it. You could hardly even
sports.
Continue with the newscast. We had a good time, didn't we?
Well, Jhani used to say, "Listen, don't do that. I can't take it. I'm going to crack up on the air. I can't take that." And he used to always say that, and that made at least me personally want to do it even more.
And when I did it the next time, when he cracked me up, I have to read, like hiding my eyes, read the copy. And I was doing a terrible job because it was sports and I didn't know how to pronounce anyone's name. Al Anthony called us in, Chris. You remember that one time?
Oh, yeah.
And he was upset. The vein in his forehead was bulging.
Well, we also had a little trick that we did with the fire extinguisher. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I was the culprit. I took a fire extinguisher, Mike, and snuck up behind Bruce while he was on the air live talking. I think he might have been doing a spot or a PSA. And I just shot this thing right in the small of his back. Couldn't get into his rear end because he was sitting down. But I shot
there was
the small of his back, and Bruce is like reading the highs today. And, we just thought that was funnier than ever.
We had a news guy, Victor J. DeMarco. Do you remember Victor J. DeMarco?
Oh, yeah.
And I got the idea from you, and he was doing the news, and I snuck up behind him and did the fire extinguisher. He must have jumped about 3 feet off the chair while he was giving the news.
Oh, yeah.
Bruce, I don't know if you recall, but Chris was famous for never being in the studio. He'd start a record and walk out and take care of some business.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
office. And if you remember, we had the 3 turntables back in the day. And let's say he's playing a record on turntable number 1. I'd cue up a record on turntable number 3 to the inside lock groove where the record's over and it's just going.
Yeah.
And I'd put that in audition, turn it all the way up.
Yeah.
And Chris would open the control room door thinking he had time left. And he figured out that, oh my God, I'm late. And he cracked the mic on the air in the middle of another song and say, Kaye.
Well, another thing that I used to do, and I got this idea from just listening to other people on the air, being out of the control room where you shouldn't be, you should be in there for those 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes. The record had run out, and I jumped back in, turn on the mic. You know what? We like that song so much. How about an instant replay? And while it was still rolling, just pick up the tone arm and slide it over on the record, and we'd play it twice in a row. But basically, because I was late getting back into the control room.
Hey, Bruce, why don't you tell the people watching this podcast that about how incredibly beautiful these studios were, especially compared to Cayman studios?
Oh, yeah. Cayman was in the middle of a cow pasture. It was just on its own little building. Everybody was in there, the sales and the general manager, just a building in the middle of a cow pasture. And with the 3 towers sticking up on it was the corner of Highland and Sterling in Highland, California. And then there was a long road from the building up to, I think it was Baseline. Well, going to Kfxm, it was, now didn't Howard tell us, didn't he strike a deal where he gave some of the land? I think didn't he own that land to build and the trade-off would be the Holiday Inn would also build the Kfxm studios. Well, those studios were absolutely gorgeous. Well, when we were there in the early 70s, they were gorgeous, but they must have really been something back in 1960, late 63, when they moved there they were in a little building in the middle of the field too. And we had a big picture window that looked out onto the Olympic-sized swimming pool at the Holiday Inn, and people would come in and look through the window, and it was a nice blue tint, so it didn't get real bright in there. And they were really showcase studios, as was KDUO. That was like right across from us. They had the same picture, a picture window also, and then the newsroom was right in the middle of both studios. Yeah, they were absolutely beautiful. It was a pleasure to work there.
I remember it was such a good feeling to be on the air at that radio station that when you got off, you wish you could stay on. Yeah. You couldn't wait to get on the next day.
Right. And I remember, Jhani, you always had a record queued up and ready to go at the ready in case anything. You remember that? Anything bad happened, like something that you weren't prepared for. You always had a record queued up. It was your go-to record. Do you remember that? Did you ever have to use? You ever have to use it?
I was there for the big earthquake. Remember where the pool was emptying and whatnot? Oh, was it 71 or?
Oh yes, 71. That's right.
Yeah, and the rack and Doug Collins was in the production studio cutting the spot. And he had, remember how he used to hold a razor blade between his teeth with his lips? And he's cutting tape. And I see this rack almost fall on Doug, and the pool is emptying. So after that, I learned to always have a record ready to go.
Excellent. Well, that probably came in handy more than a few times. What was so much fun about KFXM, and I guess this is the reason Top 40, if they have Top 40 radio anymore, I don't even know if they call it that, but not only was it fun to be on the air, and we were kind of local stars playing the music, but back then there were so many great acts like Three Dog Night and Elton John and the Carpenters, and well, you name it. There were so many stars. And today's music is, I don't know, I at the risk of sounding like my parents used to sound, it all sounds alike to me today. I can't even listen. But back then, not only the DJs stood out on the radio, but the music was always so great. You'd always be excited about the next Elton John song that would come on, or you know, who would have the next big hit or the pick hit of the week. It was the music, I think, was just as important as the DJs back then. And I don't think we'll ever see that again.
No.
Well, they used to have in the record companies guys like Neil Sedaka, just to use an example, sit in a room and they would write songs and try to then put it to music. And it was a big deal to produce new hit songs. And they had staffs that really were in charge of that, because that's what you wanted, was a breakout record that could finally be played on every station across the nation. But the breakout stations were like KFXM came in, you know, the San Bernardino's, Happy, Bakersfield. And then you finally get it on KHJ. But they had staffs that would write and try to figure out how to make another hit song that was very commercial. And they don't do that anymore. You know, I know that supposedly there's great writers still, but boy, they really went after it back then with trying to pen hit songs that would just take off.
Chris, do you remember the rodeo that we had to wrestle a calf? Do you remember that? Were you there at the time? It was a rodeo at Orange.
I remember that.
Oh, maybe you were lucky. Maybe you were lucky enough not to be there at the time. Jhani, do you remember that?
No, I don't recall it at all.
Yeah, we had to wrestle a calf, and it sounded cute at the time. But when that day came, and there were thousands of people in the stands at the Orange Show, and the clown had a pet monkey, and the monkey's job was to get the bronco his attention away from the rodeo cowboy, so the cowboy could scram and the monkey would get the attention away of the bucking bronco or whatever it was. Anyway, this monkey, for some reason, didn't like me. So I'm wrestling this 300-pound calf, and the monkey got PO'd at me, and he bit my arm. And this is in front of thousands of people. He bit my arm, and I'm thinking, you know what? This is not fun. And everybody's laughing and enjoying the show. The monkeys went behind me, grabbed my pants, and started pulling my pants down.
Jeez.
I think somebody has a picture of that. I wanted to kick that monkey right in the teeth. And finally, the clown got the monkey off of me, the monkey off my back, literally. I was exhausted after that. And I felt like, you know, I was 500 pounds, every muscle in my body, because wrestling a 300-pound calf, trying to fight a monkey off of me, that was like one of my worst memories of KFXM personal appearance. It's too bad you guys missed it. Maybe you'd have had fun.
Jhani, tell them about the time the FCC caught you not taking readings, and you thought, this is it. I'm headed for a firing. I'm going to go to jail. Because back in those days, with our first-class radio telephone licenses, we feared the Federal Communications Commission. And we knew that they were calling the shots. You could be in hot water. But how did that unfold, Jhani?
Well, I was great about taking transmitter readings and changing the pattern at night and doing everything by the book. I always did it by the book, my whole career, except for one night. And on that night, there had been this guy who would come by and look through the glass at the studios one time, and he would call me every once in a while. Well, he had become a multi-millionaire. He had inherited all this money, and he was in Los Angeles, and he wanted me just to step off the air and he'll buy me a radio station. And he keeps calling me, and I'm talking to him. I'm getting all hooked on this money. By the way, he's the one who ended up with who was this race car driver that did the Sprach Zarathustra by revving up several different car engines, racing cars. Chris, do you remember? Real popular.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah. Anyhow,
No, I don't know.
so I'm distracted by all this. And finally, I see someone at the window, and we had the intercom where you could talk outside. Now, you got to remember, at night, the window didn't work in our favor. People could see us, but it was hard for us to see out. And I said, yeah, what can I play for you? I went on the intercom. And he goes, I go, what? And I see him holding something up against the window, and I go look at it, and it's a badge from the FCC.
Oh, geez.
Oh.
God, oh my God. And I know I haven't taken the readings, and I can't believe this is happening to me. So I go down the hall and let him in. That was like 11 something at night, because I was on until midnight. I wasn't let go, and the company basically wasn't off the hook until 5:45 the next morning. They even called Al Anthony, who was on vacation in Hawaii. And Al said, I'm on vacation in Hawaii. And to which the deputy or whatever for the commission said, well, I suggest you get back. That's how bad it was. They got us in 21 violations. One was we didn't even have a receiver to listen to KFI. We were supposed to be the primary EBS station, emergency broadcast station, to alert the general public what to do in case the bomb dropped. And we couldn't even get the signal from KFI because we didn't own the set. And they really dug into us. Remember the little tiger decals we had? The yellow decals? Some of us would put them on the glass of our licenses that were hanging right beside the board in the control room. They cited us for obstruction of license and this and that. Wow. And I really thought I was over it. And I got to give it to Doug Collins and Al Anthony. They never brought it up again, and there was no problem.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story, Jhani, because like I said, those first-class radio telephone licenses were so precious because anybody who wanted to move around in any market, especially secondary market, you had to have them, and you didn't want to get them taken away. That was the biggest thing. Like, you're a violation of an FCC rule, we're going to pull your license. That means you couldn't work. And right. We're in our young 20s, and we thought, oh my God, we better toe the mark. So what a scary thing for you to go through.
Chris, tell them about one time you convinced the engineer to give you like 100-foot microphone extension cord. And you decided that you were going to pull a promotion at the swimming pool.
It was one of those days, and San Bernardino, Riverside, 105, 110 degrees outside. And I'm on this mic, and I said, you know what? If you're within the sound of this signal and you come by the Holiday Inn, join us around the pool because we're having the Kfxm summer sacrifice. I made it up in my mind at the last minute that we're going to call it the Kfxm. summer sacrifice. Now, it felt like to me, this Olympic-sized pool that was right outside our studios, that we had maybe 1,000 people. Maybe we did. Maybe there's only 500, but it wasn't 100, it wasn't 200, but we had hundreds of people that drove up, stopped, and on the air and outside, I said, okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to give away some free albums. If you jump in the water with your clothes on, you get a free album. It's the Kfxm Summer of Sacrifice. Oh my God. We almost drowned about 4 or 5 different people because everybody jumped in on top of each other, around each other. The pool started to overflow. And Vic Torado, who is the general manager of the Holiday Inn, came out and he says, "What in the world have you done now, Roberts? This is unbelievable. I'm going to try to see if I can get you fired." And I thought, oh, brother, here I was in hot water all 3 years that I was there for one reason or another. But the Kfxm hot 110-degree day turned into the summer sacrifice. And the problem was we didn't have enough records to give. We started giving away 45s. And one thing that a radio station, because you're on the list to the record company, you'd get all of these albums that were worthless, that were no-name album. We gave them all away. And we must have given away, I thought it was 1,000, but it could have been a few hundred, up to about 500 or 600. But it was a day that we'll never forget. And it was one of those situations like Big Al Anthony says to me, "What in the world have you done now?" And I said, "Well, I just thought we were promoting the station." We were pretty popular. And when you asked them to show up at a certain area, we learned that we had a little pull in general public with that 590 position and 1,000 watts during the day, that actually it blanketed. You could hear it in Los Angeles, you could hear it in the high desert, hear it out to Palm Springs. We had a great signal, and it probably rivaled KFI's signal, at least at the time, in the greater Inland Empire. And of course, KFI was a 50,000 watt clear channel station. But that was a fun day. I'll never forget that, with all those bodies jumping in the pool at one time. And, you know, there was an advantage if you were an announcer at Kfxm, with that pool right out in front, with the various beauties that would show up. And could you play a record for me? Absolutely. And could you leave a telephone number for me? And it was just one of those situations where, for a young guy, it was pure heaven. And we really enjoyed it, didn't we, Bruce and Jhani? We really did.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the DJs that aren't with us today. Doug Collins, he did the morning show, and he was the program director. Today he's up in Stockton. He moved up to Stockton because I think his father was ill at the time and he had to take care of him. So that's where Doug is today, Stockton. And I think he runs apartments, or he manages an apartment complex, and is semi-retired. Tom Devine. Whatever happened to Tom Devine? Remember that name, you guys?
I remember Tom. Tom was a hippie that was on the air, and he actually kind of had a hippie delivery, you know, like it wasn't a top 40 delivery on the air with the intros and outros to records. Had the really long hair, in a page boy. I think you can see it on the Tiger tune sheet, the way he looked. He lived up in Running Springs, and it was perfect for him to be up in the mountains, living up there.
Because he looked like a mountain man.
he looked like a mountain man, and he fit in perfectly up in Running Spring.
Well, he did afternoons before I got there, but I remember when I was at Cayman and checking out what the competition was doing at KFXM, I'd tune in Tom some afternoons, and he would segue right from a record to commercials and didn't even talk. It was like he came up with his own format. I don't think Anthony enjoyed that.
No.
Tom was, I guess he thought it was all the music without all the talk. And then he eventually got moved to the all-night show, and then he left. I think he went to San Diego. Bobby Blue, whatever happened to him? Did he went to Long Beach after KFXM, didn't he?
KNAC 105.5, yeah.
Right. So
now what Bobby used to do too, and a lot of people don't remember this unless you're in the business, and Jhani might remember us talking about it. You're supposed to change the pattern to the station when the sun goes down, because you don't want to interfere with other stations close to 590 or 600. And when I was working in the deserts, I used to always remember Bobby Blue. Could hear him forever late at night. He never changed the pattern.
Yeah.
And, he just left it up 1,000 watts at night. So it was like booming off the ceiling of the sky, and that 1,000 watts at night. Well, it was a great signal during the day, but it would just unbelievably bounce all over the place at night. He just didn't change the pattern.
Well, we went for a time there when usually, disc jockeys came and went, but when we were there, we were there for quite a while. I know I think 2+ years there. Jhani, how long were you at KFXM?
I think it was around 3 or 1973, October 1973. I went to KROQ in LA, and that a lot of great talent went through KFXM, but the trio of us three, we're very lucky. We all got to Los Angeles, and not just for a few days or a couple of years. We did some serious time in Los Angeles.
Right.
I remember Chris and I would talk, maybe you were in the control room too, Bruce. Boy, if we could only get to LA by the time we're 30, and Chris, we both got in at 24 or 25, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, you went to Cute from KFXM, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Cute 102, which turned into Disco Los Angeles, and was quite an event. We got Jhani a job there, and Jhani got the job like nobody ever would get a job in broadcasting, maybe ever again. The program director, Larry Williams, good guy, great program director, because he didn't mess with you, let you do your own thing. And he had asked me before, he says, we need some help on the station, relief-wise. Well, do you know of anybody? And I said, yeah, the guy's on the air right now. Johnny Kaye. He goes, can we call him? I said, yeah, call him right now. And Jhani, you picked the story up because you tell it pretty good too. It's an amazing one where the program director that I was working for in Los Angeles dials up Johnny Kaye, who's on the air. Jhani.
Well, so he calls me, I think on the hotline, because you give him the number. And the normal way you got a job back in that day, you would record your show wherever you were working at the present time and cut it down so it was in a compressed fashion and mail it to whatever radio station you were hoping to be hired at. Well, Chris had contacted Larry Williams, and he's on the phone with me, and he goes, we're going to go 24 hours a day, because they were signing off at midnight and they needed an all-night guy. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to drive a tape into you or what? He goes, I need it right away. He goes, just set the phone down. I'll listen to you through the phone. And that's how I got
down on the console.
Well, Jhani, you also, when you started the program director part of your career, you went to El Paso from Los Angeles, didn't you?
Yeah, right. You had moved on to KEZY at the time, and I think K100, because let's see, I was at Q102, and they were sharing me with KKDJ. So I was doing weekends and relief over at KKDJ, which is now KISS. And then I went to KGBS. And then my old program director at KROQ here in Los Angeles had purchased 2 stations in El Paso. And he goes, look, time for me to be the general manager, time for you to become a program director. And he flew me out. Took 3 flights though, because I kept turning them down. He was so upset the last time I flew in, he wouldn't take me back to the airport. I had to get my own ride.
Yeah. Yeah, that was back before the days of Uber and Lyft. How did you get back?
Oh, another employee of the radio station took me back to the airport. I remember one time going back to KFXM. Bruce is full-time at KFXM, but working weekends at KEZY. And Doug Collins, he only did this once. We had a staff meeting. Remember, we never had those, but we had a staff meeting in the mid-morning. And he wanted to do, I guess, what was fashionable in those days. All the jocks were going to sit around. We were going to play a couple sets from each jock show, and the rest of us were going to critique each other. And it came time for us to discuss Bruce, and I held my hand up to take the floor. And I said, Bruce, I want to talk to you about how you say the call letters. It should be KEZY. I wasn't even talking about KFXM.
I'll bet that went over like a Led Zeppelin, huh?
Yeah.
So, Chris, when you were at Cute, you were playing the disco.
Yeah.
Where did you go? How did you get into sport?
Well, actually, I had always done sports on the side, even in San Bernardino on the old teleprompter, UHF, channel 3, I believe it was. We did the CIF game of the week, a high school game of the week. Football, basketball, did baseball. And Jhani actually produced and directed a baseball game that that I was playing in. And Jhani was part of that in the beginning. And I had hurt my knee real bad, so I couldn't play baseball anymore. But they asked me, they said, would you like to do some announcing, play-by-play? Absolutely. Are you kidding? And that's where my play-by-play started. But Jhani had produced a baseball game out at old Paris Hill Ballpark. And I said, hey, John, you did a good job on that direction, except when the ball was hit, you'd watch the runner going down to first and already to second, not keep track of the ball. But that's because Jhani was not a big sports aficionado, but it was kind of a side joke. But I did Riverside City College, basketball, football, UCR, football, basketball. I did Long Beach State in parallel with my career at KFI and coached from 82 to 92 before I got the UCLA job. But while I was doing play-by-play, I never could seem to break through name-wise as a sportscaster. And what did it for me is good old Jhani put me on the air on KFI with Wellman and Barkley, the legendary morning show. And I did sports with Wellman and Barkley. And then they came up with the idea on the Mark and Kim show on Coast. Well, let's have Roberts go across the hallway from the AM KFI to Coast 103 and do sports with Mark and Kim. And really, that kind of tabbed me as a sports guy in Los Angeles. But the whole time, I had been doing play-by-play. And thank goodness, I had some good people I worked for, like Jhani, that would let my schedule float so that I could work weekends still 6 days a week, but I could get out of town to go do a game at Long Beach State. They played the University of Cincinnati, etc. But it started back at Coast and KFI, but with a background that had always continued from San Bernardino on the old teleprompter on television. And I've told Jhani before that if that didn't happen, I don't know where my career would have went, but
You would have been done just fine.
well, it was a big break, especially working for both two #1 shows, Loman and Barkley, KFI, and then with Mark and Kim, where we established the coined the phrase, and I think it even got trademarked, athletic briefs on Coast 103. But that's the transition into sports, which I was very happy about. But Jhani Kaye, who's been a lifelong friend, played a very big part because I was in there hustling him too. Hey, I can do this. I can do that. I can do this for you. You know, and Jhani goes, yeah, okay, well, let me digest it. Let me think about it. But those two breaks on those two morning shows really helped the sports identification. And who's our general manager buddy is?
Bill Ward?
Bill Ward. I had hustled Bill Ward for years to try to get the UCLA job. And when I left KFI Coast, I went to work for the old KMPC. And the guy that had been doing UCLA games that last year, just 1 year he did them, died. John Riebenstorff, the late John Riebenstorff died. And at KMPC, I was the only one in the building that had any play-by-play experience. And Bill Ward called me into his office and says, you know what? You've wanted this job forever. He says, now you got it. He says, you just got to get your butt over to UCLA, make friends with Terry Donahue, the football coach, Jim Herrick, the basketball coach, Pete Dallas, the athletic director, and Mark Dellins, who's in charge of radio and television. And talk about right place, right time with Bill Ward. He took care of me. And I know, Jhani, you have a ton of respect for him, and so does Bruce. But that's that story. But it all started back at KFI and Coast, Bruce.
And Jhani, how did you end up at Coast as the program director? You came from Chicago, right?
I was in Chicago, and then I got hired as the production director and APD at KFI. And Coast was still playing beautiful music at the time as the sister station to KFI. And they had made the decision to go adult contemporary. And my program director, Tom Bigby at KFI, put me up for the job. He really wanted it, I think, but they wanted Tom to remain with KFI. Anyhow, I went in and interviewed, and there was a consultant, Mary Catherine Sneed, who had come up with this adult contemporary format from Atlanta. She was really going to help make the decision. Don Dalton, the general manager, liked me a lot. Mary Catherine, not so much. And basically, I think they said thank you, but no. And I was a little disappointed, but they told me, don't worry, one day you'll get KFI. I went, oh, that's good. So, but I'm a little tweaked at Coast because I really thought I was the right guy for the job. So one day I'm on the phone in my office. Mary Catherine Sneed comes in and sits in the couch before me. And I decide I'm just going to keep talking so that I don't have to talk to her. And meanwhile, I'm helping cart all the music for Coast. And there's hundreds of cartridge tapes in my office.
Oh.
Finally, I cupped the phone and I said, look, I said, what do you want? She goes, I want to have dinner with you. This is like a Friday. I want to have dinner with you on Monday. I said, look, it's all right that you didn't hire me. I'm fine with that and this and that. she goes, no, I really want to have dinner with you. I have to fly back to Atlanta to be with my child, but, you know, can we have dinner on Monday? I said, okay, fine. I was still going to blow her off on Monday, but we went and had dinner at the Old World Cafe on Sunset Boulevard. And it's the first night I ever ordered a clam chowder. I don't like fish at all, but for some reason, I'm so upset, I'm going to eat clam chowder. And she's looking down at her bowl, and as she's lifting up her soup spoon, she goes, do you still want to be program director of Coast? Which shocked the crap out of me. And I slammed my hand down. I said, lady, don't fuck with me. I wasn't good enough for you, last week. Why am I good enough? Are you serious? She goes, yeah. Why am I good enough for you now? She goes, I saw you do something the other night. Well, what it was, to make a long story short, back in those days, we had music libraries, which were like rows and rows, like a library of books, but they held albums and 45s, music. And I happened to be down one of the aisles. She couldn't see me. She came in, and the music director of KFI was sitting there, and it's real late at night. It's like 9, 10 o'clock. And he's still trying to get a log punched out, and he's working on the computer. And I remember thinking, I knew she was down the aisle. And I thought, I'm going to make you regret not hiring me. And I said, Steve, what are you doing here? He goes, I got to get this log out. And I said, you've got a family, you got kids, go home, I'll finish this for you. And I did it. And I did that to make a point about, I'm a great guy. She didn't come out. I never saw her. So fast forward back to the restaurant. She goes, well, I saw you one night. You're the kind of guy we want, because you would rather stay and let your employee go home. And that's how I got the job. It was literally 20 years later before I told her the story that I knew she was hiding down there, and I did that on purpose.
Oh, yeah. So you were at Coast for 20 years?
21 total. I was associated with the station.
Wow.
Love songs on the Coast. And I always say that Jhani invented it. Became status quo for the entire music industry. He's the man when it comes to love songs, because love songs along the coast was huge. And the ratings were phenomenal for those 20 years. When you thought about love songs, you thought about Coast 103. And I kidded Jhani one time. I said I was on a sports trip over in Hawaii, and I was listening to this radio station. The station says, and here's some more along the crater instead of the coast. And Jhani says, please don't let anybody know that. I'm consulting over there.
Jhani, after you left, you went to K-Earth, and I was there at the time, and you brought K-Earth to number one. Remember that one?
Yeah,
of course I remember that. We had a rating came out, and it was you were elated that K-Earth was number one, and the Coast has never been the same since you left.
Never the same.
Yeah, and what happened with the folks at Coast? Were they happy for you to leave, or did you just not come to an agreement, or what happened there?
I had flown to Atlanta, and I never negotiated my own deals, but this time they wanted me to and not use my agent. And the guy in charge of radio there said, you've kind of hit the glass ceiling in terms of income. And without saying that we were going to part company, we both understood I was going to part company. And the consultant of Coast at the time was this person called E. Carl. And he had called me, and I said, E, I'm not worried. I said, I've got a really good track record. I'll get hired, and I'll take on Coast and I'll beat Coast. And that's what I did. I went to K-Big. Went to K-Big, and then K-Earth and the Wave. They put the Wave on top of me as a secondary job, kind of. But
for no extra pay.
Oh, no, I got extra pay.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, yeah. No, my agent is a great guy. Jhani was his name. He even had ratings bonuses built into my contract. And they were good, based on total persons 12 plus, 25, 54, 25, 54 women, all these different demographics and variations. And he had the same thing built when they assigned me the wave, had the same thing built. At the last second, he had me take into the general manager an addendum to my contract that said, if Coach K-Big became 1 and 2, that everything quadrupled. And I mean, I made in that one bonus check more than I made in a year. It was.
You mean even more than you made at Kfxm?
$712.50. I told this story on another podcast, but if you guys remember, when we were there, they only gave raises of $12.50 a month.
Yeah.
Annually. That's why I remember $712.50, because it took me forever to get there from the $665 or whatever I was earning when I began.
Do you remember how excited we were when they cut our weekend shifts down from 6 to 5 hours? I remember, Jhani, you jumped up in the air. You were so happy.
Wow. Weekend shifts. Wow. 6 days.
Yeah. And holidays.
By the way, Bruce, you were going through the staff, other staff members. We have to bring up Vic Marino.
Oh, yes, Vic.
To give Vic his props, he did really well in the engineering department of CBS television network over at Television City in Hollywood.
Yeah, Vic. And who were some of the other weekend guys back then?
Before we go on to another weekend guy, we've got to tell the story. Jhani and I together one night, late. Vic's working the all-night show. And it could have been 1 or 2 in the morning when we were together. I said, let's call up Vic. I'll do an impersonation of Howard Tullis, the owner. We'll see if we can get him to change his name on the air. And Vic was just like, I was talking like this, like, hey, Vic, Howard here. You know what? We've been thinking about you a lot. We would like you to change your name from Vic Marino to Vic Schmick. Why don't you do a couple of breaks, introing some records, and use the name Vic Schmick? Oh, sure, Mr. Tullis, I will do that. And Jhani and I are rolling in his apartment as we listen to Vic call himself Vic Schmick. And then to add insult to injury, we got him to flip over one of the old records and play American Patrol, the instrumental on Kfxm. One of my favorite songs, Vic. Would you flip it over at 45 and play American Patrol? Yes, sir, Mr. Tullis. Now, can you imagine what kind of trouble you got into if somebody actually reported that to Howard or Al Anthony or whatever? But that was part of the fun we had as 21, 22-year-old guys. And Vic, then we finally called Vic back and said, you know what, we're going to stick with Marino. Just stick with Vic Marino. Forget about the Vic Schmick. And we never told him until years later.
That is so cruel, Chris.
Bruce, and Chris didn't tell all of the story, because when he had him play this instrumental, which was like a march, like a German march.
American Patrol.
American Patrol. On the air. That's it. Chris called him back and said, hey, because Chris had convinced him that Howard was driving through the area on the way to Palm Springs with the wives in the back, a friend and 2 wives in the back. And he called him back as soon as Vic had finished playing the record the first time, said, the wives were talking. We couldn't even hear it. Play it again.
Oh,
brother.
Yeah, those were some good times. You guys ever drive through San Bernardino and look at those 3 towers? And
Sure.
remember when?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I was there.
there's-
I was there the night they were taking the glass door off that said KFXM with the tiger on it.
Oh,
Memories.
yeah. And for those who aren't aware where KFXM was, it was right where the 15, the
All the
215,
freeways meet.
the 215 and the 10
Yeah.
intersect. Those three towers are KFXM. They've been there for, well, what, since the 40s, maybe?
Might have been the 20s. I don't know.
Yeah. And isn't there there was by those towers, wasn't there like a sewer system? Right
Oh,
by
yeah.
the, right.
San Bernardino Sanitation was by tower number 3.
Exactly.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were right by Orange Show Road, and everything is built up so much
Yeah.
since then.
Change.
And KFXM now is a talk radio station that
Yeah.
I guess the Salem radio network, they're part of that. And
KTIE,
yeah, KTIE. And
the Inland Empire.
right, the Inland Empire. And then K-Man, what's K-Man now? I've lost track. What's
It
12?
was Radio Disney at one point.
Yeah, it might be a Spanish station now. I'm not sure. Boy, how radio has changed. Huh? AM used to be king, and now there are some AM stations that just pull the plug and just sign off. They can't
Yeah.
make any money.
Sad.
And back then, when we were at KFXM, we kind of ruled the roost because there was really nowhere else to go. There wasn't iTunes. There wasn't satellite radio. It was radio. That was it, AM and FM. And when we were at KFXM, FM hadn't really caught on yet. Back in the early 70s, it was kind of gaining on us. I remember, Jhani, you remember when I was visiting you at KFI, and they were experimenting with AM stereo. Do you remember? And you had AM stereo set up, and it sounded incredible, but it just never made it for some reason, because there were a few different stereo systems like Con Hazeltine,
Motorola, which we were.
yeah, and it sounded incredible, but when the FCC left it to the marketplace to decide which format, instead of making it one, which they should have done,
Right.
they left it to the marketplace, and it just got so confusing that it just died.
AM stereo had better separation than FM. I still have my AM stereo radio because it makes AM mono. It doesn't turn it to stereo, but it's just so much brighter. It sounds like FM.
Ah, yeah, and now they've got HD radio where the AM radio sounds pretty good. I've got maybe 3 or 4 HD table radios around here that I listen to, but it's really tough because HD radio's been around for maybe 15 years or so, and it's just not making it either. It's AM and FM is starting to, has pulled away and ruled the roost for years. AM is kind of going down, and satellite radio is, people don't want to pay for radio, so it's not really doing that well. It's okay. I guess FM radio has ended up the overall victor of the broadcasting set. But how it's all changed since we were at KFXM back in the early 70s, and maybe not for the better. I don't know, Jhani or Chris, have you been keeping track of all the layoffs at iHeart?
Yeah. Sad. Very sad. We were there during the great times, guys.
Yeah, Chris, you once told me that everything that you've done since KFXM, that your happiest days in broadcasting were at the Big 59.
Well,
I agree.
they're special.
Yeah.
And like this banner that's behind me, the '95 championship year in basketball, the top team in the nation. I broadcast that, and I've had several Rose Bowls that I've done play-by-play for the 23 years at UCLA. Very special. Those 3 years and San Bernardino at KFXM are just about as good as it gets. And you and I are kidding each other the other day, Bruce. Yeah, we weren't making any money, but it's almost like I didn't care about the money at that point. It was like I would almost pay them to be on the air.
Right. The money was secondary as long as you could pay rent.
And just having fun and enjoying it and being a young guy and being part of the community and being right up to date with all the latest music. It was a ball. And I know, Jhani, you feel the same way.
It was something special. And unfortunately, young people who want to be in whatever broadcasting becomes probably won't experience the same thing. So I think we were very fortunate. Bruce had mentioned earlier, we were still somewhat stars. If you recall, every week the station put out a Tiger tune sheet that listed the top 30 records of the week. And across over on Orange Show Road was a white front there that had like 15 cash registers out front as you check out. And at every cash register were these Tiger tune sheets. And we couldn't go in there and get out in 15 minutes because people would be asking for our autographs. It was wonderful.
Yeah, those tune sheets, I used to collect them back before I even got into radio back in the early 60s. I remember I was living in Fontana and I was listening to, this was before K-Man. KFXM was really the only station, the only top 40 station. And Gary Price was doing the Platter Party show on KFXM from 6 to midnight. And every Friday night, he'd unveil the new top 40 of the Fabulous 59. And every Saturday, I would convince my parents, one or the other, to, you got to take me up to Lyle's Record City in Fontana Square. I got to pick up the new KFXM survey. That was a big deal back then.
Huge.
It was.
Let me throw out a question to you two guys, and I'll include one. What was the best, because we used to get the ability to make some money outside the station with jobs, side work, blah, 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 etc. What was the best side job connected with the radio station that you got outside the building?
I'll go first. It was when I was at KIQQ, we had a promotion one year where we would run the Rose Parade and we would furnish the right channel, and people watching on TV would listen to the Rose Parade on the TV, which would be the left channel. So if you turned KIQQ on, you could hear the parade in stereo. Well, as part of the promotion, I was doing mornings at the time. They wanted me to take part in the pre-parade festivities. So I got to be on camera and do the pre-parade show, which aired nationally from for an hour before the Rose Parade started. Well, it turns out they liked me so much that first year that I got hired back another 3 or 4 years, I think it was, to do the pre-Rose Parade. So that was a fun job. And then KTLA got sold, and they wanted all the KTLA employees to take part in the Rose Parade. So I didn't get to do it anymore. But that was a fun thing every year.
You did a good job too.
Well,
Sure
thanks.
did.
And Jhani, what about your side gig? Your favorite?
My side gig was provided by Chris Roberts. If you recall, he would go to this nightclub called The Turntable.
Yeah, I remember.
And Chris, being the money guy, he was working a lot at the turntable at night, plus doing radio during the day. I think he was getting 50, 60, whatever dollars it was. He figured out that he could hire me for 30 and go out there on certain nights and give him some relief. So there was a fringe benefit to the job. It was that the bartender always liked the disc jockey drunk, so he provided free alcohol all night long.
Oh,
You're right.
yeah. I remember that bartender because Chris got me to do a couple of gigs at the turntable also.
Yeah.
And the bartender was a kind of a big, heavy set guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember he would offer me, it was a drink that was blue. And he'd give it to me like, you better drink this, or, I'm a big, heavy set guy. You'll be sorry you didn't. So I drank it. And this was back before MAD, I shouldn't have been driving, but he got me so polluted. I vaguely remember driving home, and I thought, never again would I do this. Those blue drinks, he had them in like a shot glass.
Oh yeah.
He started.
He would feed me whiskey, and he was. You're right. He was rotund like Hoss Cartwright, right?
Yeah.
From Bonanza. And he would say, "I'm going to kick you in the ass with these boots if you don't drink this."
My favorite side job, guys, in San Bernardino, and I'm not going to elaborate on it. You guys probably remember it as soon as I mention it. I was the master of ceremonies for the Miss Nude Universe contest of the San Bernardino Fun Ranch. And the one thing about doing emceeing of that, I had to be in the nude also.
Really?
Memorable.
No.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
I
never the Tiger tune sheet?
For a guy that's 22 years old, it was a lot of fun.
Hey, for anybody viewing this extravaganza that is interested in getting into broadcasting, I think the three of us should offer a little advice. What would you, Jhani, what advice would you give to somebody that is listening to the radio and says, well, I think I'd like to do that someday? What would you tell them?
One, there are very few jobs. If you want to do it, you have to want to do it from the tip of your head to the bottom of your feet with full passion. And you need to understand, in today's world, it's all about business. It's not about the fun we've been sharing here on this broadcast. It is about making money, and there are not very many jobs, and you probably won't make a lot of money because they know too many people want to do it. So really think it through. And even if you decide to pursue it, have a second career. Don't go study broadcasting in your college years. Study business or something else you can fall back on. Because most people, and Bruce, Chris, and myself were very lucky. We made it to our dream market of Los Angeles. But for every one of us, there was 900 or 9,000 that didn't get there. So
right.
Don't hold your breath.
What's your advice, Bruce?
Well, my advice would be to anybody that wants to get into broadcasting to contact you and ask how to get into real estate.
You know what? I'm going to tell you a story, guys. And Jhani didn't know this. Neither did you, Bruce. I used to get together with Howard Tullis, the owner of Kfxm KDUO, and I used to quiz him. I used to sit down with him. He'd be in Al Anthony's chair in the office, and I'd say, Howard, I want to be a millionaire like you are. How in the world do I do it? And he would start in on like, you got to save money, kid. How much money are you saving now? And I loved Howard Tullis. I know he was tight with a dollar, but I learned a lot from him and learned a lot from Al Anthony. And I think the story that I remember best about the career, I had cornered Ralph Edwards, the big This Is Your Life MC, game show production man. I cornered him in an elevator in Television City. And I said, Ralph, I want to be like you. What do I need to do? And I could tell it was like he had no desire to talk to this young guy about broadcasting, but he left me with one type of advice, or a good example of advice. And I think I've shared it with Jhani and Bruce already before. He says, kid, it's a tough business. It's cutthroat and it's hard. Just keep knocking on doors and going and saying hello to people. And I never forgot that. And you know what? Even in the modern day world of computers and emails and blogs and blah, 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 there's nothing like picking a phone up, talking to somebody, or going to see them in person. But I never forgot that from Ralph Edwards, because in the long run, he's absolutely correct, no matter what age you live in.
I was up for something back when I was at KIQQ, and Ralph Edwards was going to produce it. It was going to be some kind of TV show. Unfortunately, the pilot never got off the ground, and I spent, weeks and months formulating this TV show. My partner at the time, Tony St. James, the show was going to be a nighttime show, and it was perceived as it was going to be a national half-hour show. And Tony and I would host it, and would be trivia questions. That I think it was called Trivia Quiz Tonight, but I met Ralph like one time. It fizzled, and just like most pilots, it never got off the ground. And it was one of those things where when I hear the name Ralph Edwards, I think, yeah, well, it never happened. And as we know, Jhani and Chris, that there were a lot of promises and things that you'd be up for, that it could be, even though we loved it, it could be one of the most heartbreaking careers you could ever think of, because and auditioning, like I think I was either third or fourth in line when they were interviewing people and auditioning people to take over Kfxm's American Top 40. And I had a meeting with Don Bastante, I think his name is.
Right.
And I was like right in the running, and they went with Shadow Stevens. But I did end up substituting for Dick Clark on his American Music Survey whenever Dick left town or was on vacation. And one of my big thrills was Dick heard me the first show I did for him, and I got a nice note that said, Bruce, I listened to you and you were superb. And I still have that note somewhere. Getting that from Dick Clark was just, it really floored me, because I used to come home every day at school and watch American Bandstand. So to think that I substituted for Dick Clark, that was, my career has been very fulfilling, but like Chris, I wouldn't have changed a thing. And I'm happy. I've got hobbies now, and I even enjoy mowing the lawn every 2 or 3 weeks. It gets way too long, but we put in a lot of time in broadcasting, and the three of us, we weren't out of work much, and I think we deserve just sitting back and enjoying doing whatever we want, getting up whenever we want to get up.
Jhani's got some great stories about Dick Clark. In fact, how Dick used to promo the Coast on television, and Jhani produced all the commercials. And I don't know if you came up with the sandwich style, Jhani, on the commercials, where you'd start with a Coast commercial, maybe with Mark and Kim, and then later it would come back, it would be Dick, and that was a great way to promote, and you wouldn't forget the commercial that you watched. But you got some great memories with Dick Clark.
Yeah, we called those bookends, so that when the commercial set started on television, we wanted to be the first spot and the last spot, because we realized television was playing so many commercials, you forgot what was in the middle. So we didn't want to buy that time. Bruce, I got to do that show too for Dick a couple of times. And you're right, he was magnificent. I directed him in television commercials for 17 or 18 years. Wow. And he was wonderful. He was just the best. There was only one time when he got a little testy once. And it was, it seemed like we were always doing commercials on the days that ratings would come in. And every time I would say cut on a take, he would go over to the corner of the stage and be on the phone, because this man literally had like 24 projects at one time going. He was always a very smart businessman. So not only did I direct, but I wrote the scripts and I cut them in post-production. So I know what I want. And Dick would have me talk him into the take with ready, set, action, and he would light up and do his thing. Anyhow, sometimes I would speak to him in between ready, set, and action. And one day I had told him, look, I want the line read this way with this emphasis. And people were setting up lights and whatnot on the crew. And he puts his hands on his hips. He goes, I'm not going to do it. And the room stopped. Everyone stopped what they were doing. And all eyes are on this 30-some-odd-year-old guy. And I remember in my head freezing myself going, okay, what do you do now? You have been called on the carpet. I said, all right. I walked back. I went to my little director's chair. And I said, we rolled film again. I said, all right, ready. Dick, you're going to do it my way. Set. You're going to say it exactly this way. Action. And he did it, and he did it my way. And when I yelled cut, I think you could have fried eggs on his forehead. I looked down at the television monitors because we had Video Village then to review the tape. And I'm not looking at him at all. I'm going, play back the tape for me. I never did this. I needed to not look at him. And they play it back. And I said, play it again, please. And I hear, as it's playing, I hear him go clip clop. He's walking behind me and he's standing right behind me. I think I can feel his breath on my shoulders. I said, one more time, please. And I looked at it and I looked over my shoulder and looked up at him, and he's looking down at me and he goes, you were right. It is better that way. And we never had a problem again.
Yeah. Jhani, you mentioned you were at Kathy in Bakersfield. That's where Al Anthony made Mark.
He made a big name for himself. He had a TV show up there like Dick Clark.
Right. That was back in the early 60s, I think. Al was a big star in Bakersfield. Yeah. How long were you at Kathy, Jhani? I never knew you were there.
One weekend, and then I got the Kfxm.
Wow.
It was a quick trip. Yeah.
So you weren't there long enough to even make the top 30 tune sheet.
No. And of course, Charles and Hearn also own KDEO in San Diego.
Right. They own 3 radio stations. KDEO is where my favorite DJ, in fact, I connected with him a couple of months ago. He's 90 now. He used to be at Kfxm. He took Gary Price's place, 6 to midnight in 1961. Chuck Doherty. You remember the name Chuck Doherty?
He was a KCKC at one time. Yeah, he was doing country, and he would come out to Hemet and do weekends for us.
Wow.
Chuck was wonderful. What a nice man.
You know who I was thinking of the other day? Such a nice guy. Just a great guy. Marsh Carter. Do you remember Marsh Carter?
Yes. Marsh Carter story I have is that, remember he used to produce a half-hour show? Was it a religious show on the weekends that would run? You remember that?
I think so.
And he had walked in the control room, actually the production room, and says, "Hey, I'm looking for my tape, the show that's going to run this weekend." I said, "Was it that one that was up on the Ampex?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Marsh, but it's been bulk erased." I didn't know that it was something to be saved, but in the old broadcast industry, you got something you want to keep, take it down and store it somewhere.
Well, guys, we should probably toast both Howard and Al Anthony.
And
Absolutely.
we got to toast John Hearn too. He was kind of a quiet guy, and Howard was the one that was boisterous.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining me. Hope to see you all again real soon, and thanks for helping us with I Remember Radio.
Thanks, Mike. Billy.
Thanks to both.
It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun.
I've had real fun.